Right, is there quite a few here whose ancestors came over and settled in Walgate and Scholes? A lot of nodding heads though. Might be well with a brandy and a Kleenex, because some of this is very harrowing. I'm going to start off. And was the Irish famine a genocide? In the present UN Convention, genocide means acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or part, a national, ethnical, racial or religious group. So under them terms, it doesn't qualify. It was argued not to be a genocide, as the Irish tenant farmers were a socio-economic group, but the Irish famine cannot be taken in isolation. We must include the penal laws, the poor laws, the oppression of the tenant farmers, the forced poverty crisis imposed over generations by the British government and Irish landowners, the ridiculous famine relief efforts imposed by Trevelyan. He's the fellow in the fields of Athenry. He was despotic, religious zealot, and he had a pathological hate of Catholics as well. And Trevelyan and the brutal actions from despots such as Lord Lucan. His great-grandson murdered the nanny. You might have seen a documentary a bit back about him. He's not fell far from the tree, that fella. And their actions multiplied the effects of the famine and caused the biggest human disaster Europe had ever seen until the 1940s with Hitler's Holocaust. Now I'm going to start off with a poem. It's called The Eviction. It's by Michael Seagrave. He was born in Drogheda, died in Wellington Street. He was a political activist. He was on Fergus O'Connor's main committee with the Chartists, and he was also a damn good poet. And this is one of Michael's poems. A wretched quilt and a bed of straw, a shrunken frame and matted hair. A full 18 winter snows she saw. Now famine's fever has laid her there. And Malachi, her boy, is gone far across the broad Atlantic wave. A daughter of her eldest son is left to see her in a grave. She's a maiden, purer than the glow that tints the snow when spring is bright. Now down her cheeks hot tears flow. She has watched the dreary night, often startled by the dismal croak of the ravens and the banshee's cry. Not tasted sleep till daylight broke. Oh God, what horror meets her eye. A band of ruffians burst the door with huge crowbar and torch in hand, sent by their ruthless lord to clear the rightful owners of the land. Those ruffians whose muscles raised his furry hall, whose sweat increased his pampered pride. Those slaves, though they once seemed happy before the former landlord died. Now famine is a peasant's lot, and here the helpless maiden pray. For pity's sake, spur this humble cot, till that shrunken form be laid in clay. But fire the hatch, the birds will fly, that is the landlord's cry. She hears no more. The light that fled her once bright eye, and she sinks senseless to the floor. The people fly from hill and vale while flames illuminate the sky and learn grim oppression's tale with fiery vengeance in each eye. Michael Seagrave. The great Irish famine of the mid-19th century stands as a harrowing testament to the devastating impact of poverty, politics and abject neglect on a nation's most vulnerable population. Could the emigration have been contrived? No, that's what we're looking for. We've got a lot of evidence. We can first look for evidence in the Scottish Highland clearances during the previous 80 years and the laws implemented by the British government. In Scotland, the Highland clearances began in the 1750s. In the aftermath of the final Jacobite rebellion, which ended at the Battle of Culloden in 1746. It was a complete rout with 1,250 Jacobites killed within an hour. Many Scottish prisoners were sent to American plantations. A Scottish historian wrote, A people who forget their history become a substitute people. The Highland clearances have been cleansed to divert any blame for the crime from the British government, the anglicised Highland clan chieftains, the landlords and the ministers of the Church of Scotland, who together forcibly evicted a significant number of tenants in the Scottish Highlands and Islands. That significant number was around 150,000 people over almost 90 years. The tenants of the land were in the way of profit. And that's a picture by Thomas Fayard. He would have painted that round about early 1840s when they cleared the islands of Lewis, Harris and Skye from crofters so they could increase sheep farming. The English government and the Highland lords began a campaign of terror using armed forces to destroy Highland and island homes, herding the inhabitants into Britain's urban ghettos or packing them onto cargo ships for the New World colonies. Those areas where thousands of Scottish crofters and tenant farmers had once lived, a few dozen shepherds now tended flocks of sheep. People were often evicted from their homes without warning, given only enough time to escape with their lives before the fires began. In many cases, the old and the young died as their houses burned. Entire families froze to death without shelter. Many of those forced onto slave ships died en route to the North American colonies. They were packed like sardines. Tens of thousands died, thousands lost their freedom and their identity. The lords and landlords had a name for this process. It was called the improvement. The only thing they improved was profit. And does this sound familiar? Everything we've learned about the Irish famine this was the blueprint for it. So could this have been the blueprint for Ireland? Once the clearance of the people was done, the land was then used for sheep and cattle farming or forestry. It's quite feasible that the same tactics were employed in Ireland. The reasons, I believe, were A, it removed tenants for good, B, it increased profits, C, it also reduced the possibility of insurrection. Now, this is another sad footnote to the clearances. Has anybody been to a folk festival, or seen a folk program, and seen Cajun musicians? For Louisiana, French speakers. Now, this is their origin. In Canada, the British government demanded the French settlers of the island of Arcadia, which is Acadie in French, must learn English, renounce Catholicism, and swear allegiance to the king. Of course, they refused. Britain then deported 10,000 French settlers to make room for some of the Scottish deportees. They rechristened Arcadia, Nova Scotia. Many Arcadian families were dumped on the Louisiana coast. They made a new home in the Mississippi Bayou. The Acadians became the Cajuns. Thousands of French settlers were also evicted from New Brunswick province. The British government were getting quite adept at mass evictions. Back to Ireland. So was the Irish diaspora, I don't like that word, scattering. It's when a mushroom explodes and lets its spores go. I don't think we should use that about people, but that's what it's called. So was the diaspora, the scattering, an emigration or a deportation of an unwanted population? And B, was a famine a natural disaster that was deliberately exacerbated? It's my belief that the statements are both correct. I feel it was a deportation of a socio-economic group, which are the tenant farmers, covered up by a natural disaster. I will now present my evidence and thought. This is the heartrending story of the poor tenant farmers of Ireland, forced out their homes through famine and deprivation. Some found themselves in the pits and mills and back-to-backs of Wigan, and likewise many other British industrial towns. Many thousands more went to America and the British dominions. By 1841, Ireland's population had reached an estimated 9 million. An estimated well over 1.5 million deaths and over 2 million emigrations left an estimated 5 million by the 1850s. We'll probably never know the exact figures because the record keeping was that poor. But we do know 1.8 million arrived in the USA. In the early decades of the 19th century, Ireland saw a new outbreak of famine protests with the rise of the ribbon societies in Connaught, that's the Western Province, and later the Young Ireland movement. They sought to protect tenants against eviction by landlords who wished to clear their lands for grazing. The landowners' logic was landowners were responsible for tenants. If they had no tenants, they'd no one to be responsible for, and the evictions began. In the mid-19th century, there were a number of famines in Ireland, culminating in the Great Famine of 1845 to 51, when around 4 million people either died or were forced into exile. Most of the impoverished population depended on the potato as a staple food. Disaster struck in August 1845, when a killer fungus started to destroy the potato crop. The green stalks of potato ridges became blighted, and within a short time, the rotting crop was producing a terrible stench. About a third of the national potato crop was destroyed that year. An almost complete failure the following year led to the catastrophe for the remainder of the decade. By Black 47, which is 1847, the people were dying in the thousands from the starvation-related diseases. Now this is Bingham, the Earl of Lucan, nicknamed the Exterminator. During the famine of the late 1840s, George Bingham, Lord Lucan, was totally ruthless and introduced mass evictions from villages such as Ballinrobe, famously stating he would not breed paupers to pay priests. He demolished thousands of homes and evicted over 10,000 people in Mayo between 1846 and 1849. He even insisted on closing the workhouse in Castlebar at the height of the famine. This was in freezing winter weather. One writer highlighted hidden figures, saying 6,000 evictions might involve more than 40,000 people, as the average Irish family household consisted of 7 persons. For this, Bingham earned the hatred of many Irishmen and became known as the Exterminator, also demolishing villages and creating ranch-style farms. Now we have the first song. The parators, they grow small, over here, over here. The parators, they grow small, over here. The parators, they grow small, and we dig them in the fall, and we eat them skins and all. Over here, over here, we eat them skins and all. Over here. I wish that we were geese, night and morn, night and morn. I wish that we were geese, night and morn. Now I wish that we were the geese, for they fly and take their ease, and they live and die in peace, eating corn, they live and die in peace, eating corn. We're trampled in the dust, over here, we're trampled in the dust, over here. We're trampled in the dust, but the Lord in whom we trust, He won't give us crumb nor crust. Over here, He won't give us crumb nor crust. Over here. The praisers, they grow small, The crop went from plentiful to meagre, and then as the blight spread, a total failure over a 4-year period. This is a report from County Clare, 1847. Between November 1847 and July 1848, about 900 houses containing 4,000 inhabitants were levelled in Kilrush Union. The union is the poor union. They should be looking after the people. And still the work of destruction went on till early March 1848. 56 people, many of whom had paid their rent, were evicted from the cabins at Emla near Kilkee. The homes were levelled to the ground, the neighbours warned not to take them in. The remarks made by some of the evicted to a newspaper reporter must have expressed the feelings of many such victims. The landlords can transport or hang us. Poverty is our only crime. Many would pay rent if left in their homes. The landlords make a homemade botany bay out of the workhouse. But in New South Wales, we get enough to eat. Or the landlords, they don't want a gallows green. That's a place of execution. While the workhouse stands, they want to clear their properties of the poor, who were ready to live by their work if they had got work to do. And we'll have a look at the workhouses and the poor law. The workhouses were built in the early 1840s to relieve appalling poverty. Many were never opened. The ones that opened were unable to cope with the numbers seeking admission. As the number of evictions increased, the catastrophe was particularly bad in the West, where nearly 90% of the population were dependent on the potato. By 1848, the Western counties were in total misery and despair, with any attempts at alleviating measures in complete disarray. Many were dying and emigrating in the thousands. Initially built to accommodate about 600 paupers, most of the union workhouses were completed in 1842. But long-running financial issues meant it will be up to 4 years before they were finally used to receive the poverty-stricken. Running costs for the institutions were dependent on the collection of the poor rates from local landowners. But as the famine gripped the country, they were less inclined to pay. Therefore, the workhouses closed. Now, the song Johnny Joyce is regarded as a taboo and kept well within the local community in Connemara. One scholar wrote, the criticism against the workhouse system is expressed in the song in the poetic tradition of Ireland. The song was credited to Tom Shoenock from Carner. He and his family walked all the way to Clifton Workhouse, only to find that they could not be accepted there for lack of space. They then asked the famine relief officer, Johnny Joyce, for help and food, which was denied. His wife and children subsequently died on the way back home from hunger and exhaustion. One can only imagine the grief and anger that led to those subtly sarcastic and angry lines. It's a nice description of a song, but when I went through the song, all I could see was a broken man, deep in shock, having lost everything dear to him, his wife, children, and his home. And the song's disjointed, and he was malnourished. It'd have been all over the place. I can't believe he even wrote it. I couldn't find a tune for this one. I could find the words, but not the tune. The rhythm of the words fitted another song which was about a farmer losing everything he got, so I thought it was quite apt to put them together. Johnny Joyce, hear my voice, I'm coming to you. I'm full of hope, for you're the clever man indeed. battered, I'm stripped and parched. I'm cold, I am in need. The workhouse is full, we're starving, sir, take heed. Only the elderly will stay in Ireland, minding livestock by the walls and in the dew. There'll be no marriages or any interest in them. Give them the dowry and they will head off now. Now sad will be my fate in this weary exile. Dark is the night, cloud over Shannock Isle, where the murdered sleep in silence. I'll have to pile in those coffinless graves of her old Erin's Isle. So fare thee well, dearest father, I must go now. My friends, relations too are on their way, with all that they can carry, packed up and ready to go. From the poor hungry eyes, the tears they start to flow. Johnny Joyce, hear my voice, I'm coming to you. I'm full of hope, cause you're the clever man indeed. I'm battered, stripped and parched, I'm cold, I am in need. The workhouse is full, we're starving, sir, take heed. The workhouse is full, we're starving, sir, take heed. Johnny Joyce. It was a bit of an emotional roller coaster. First unearthing the songs and then learning them and singing them, and then reading the backstory. It was a bit brutal, actually. Now, here's some official reports about food exports. The food exports in a country where so many were starving, it's obscene, actually. So this is about the reports. Afraid that the evicted Irish tenants would become dependent on state aid, in many areas, local governments ordered the closure of soup kitchens. This added further to the sufferings of the impoverished people of Ireland. They laid the burden upon the landlords and introduced a poor tax to cover the cost to the English nation. Consequently, more and more tenants were evicted. If there were no tenants, they didn't have to pay anything. Soldiers guarded food goods that were being exported to other countries in the midst of a famine, and malnourished people who had no possessions and nowhere to go. The Irish farms exported massive amounts of food during the worst years of the famine. Throughout the entire period of the famine, Ireland was exporting enormous quantities of food. Almost 4,000 vessels carried food from Ireland to the ports of Bristol, Glasgow, Liverpool and London during 1847. The year when 400,000 Irish men, women and children died of starvation and other famine-related diseases. It was also recorded Irish exports of livestock, bacon and ham increased during the famine. This food was shipped from the most famine-stricken parts of Ireland: Ballina, Ballyshannon, Bantry, Dingle, Killala, Kilrush, Limerick, Sligo, Tralee and Westport. 3 of those ports were in Mayo. According to The Economist, Cormac O'Grada, more than 26 million bushels of grain were exported from Ireland to England in 1845. This continued throughout the famine. The only famine relief imports were Indian corn, which caused intestinal problems if not grown correctly. the facilities to mill the corn were not available to the poor. So that caused death eating that. Porridge from Indian corn, you might have heard the Clampets going on about it, grits, because that's what it tastes like. So if anybody goes to America, see if they can get some in the south. It's fibre taken to the extreme, I think. And if it's not built proper, well. Another hero of mine, Trevelyan. Trevelyan's policies. To this day, there are numerous reminders of the Great Famine to be seen in the south and west of Ireland landscapes. Workhouse sites, famine graves, sites of soup kitchens, deserted homes, villages, even traces of undug lazy beds. There are ridge and farrow beds for growing potatoes when it's either a hillside or a sloping field. It helps the drainage and stops the crop from rotting. But when the blight comes, it just dies anyway. Many roads and lanes serving no purpose were built as famine relief measures. Roads to nowhere that were left unused. There were 9 workhouses in the county of Mayo: Ballina, Ballinrobe, Belmonit, Castlebar, Claremorris, Killala, Newport, Swinford and Westport. Many were closed due to overcrowding or lack of funding or on the orders of government officials. Lord Trevelyan was the man who was in charge of administration of the British government's relief policy. I mean, you won't put King Herod in charge of a nursery, would you, with his reputation? Anyway, he had the job. It limited the government's food aid programme because of a firm belief in laissez-faire. So that means it's the policy of leaving things to take their own course without interfering. He stated in the House of Commons that the judgment of God sent the calamity to teach the Irish a lesson for being Catholic. The public works were strictly ordered to be unproductive. That is, they would create no fund to repay their own expenses. So they were doing nonsensical things. According to the writer John Mitchell, many hundreds of thousands of feeble and starving men were kept digging holes and breaking up rocks for roads which did no service or earned no income. Sometimes the people did fight back via the Young Ireland movement, but it was too little. They weren't strong enough, and they just couldn't. Most of them, I'd go on the run, and then if they were caught, they'd fall. The Michael Seagrave also wrote a poem about this, and it's called "Of Ireland." And foremost was the youth, so brave as ever trod the earth before. He raised her in his arms. Lord, save her, she's breathing. Now she's no more. Oh, speak, Kathleen, my darling bright, my own adored Cushla McCree. Cushla McCree is, if you put it in a Shakespearean concept, it'd be like I love you with every beat of my heart. It means heart's pulse, but it's used in that sort of a term in Gaelic. Oh, speak, Kathleen, my darling bright, my own adored Cushla McCree. Oh, no, thou spirit's taken flight. Revenge is all that's left for me. Have patience, youth, the voice now spoke. Tonight at 10 we meet to try that villain who has dealt death stroke, and by the God's light he will surely die. The pale moon appeared from a cloud. The earth received its murdered dead, and paler than the victim's shroud, the lover o'er the mountain sped. A tavern reached, the jury there, the murderer is guilty found. Then by tomorrow's sun I swear to fell the tyrant to the ground. Now daylight bounds with happy speed, the hounds are panting for the chase. His lordship on a prancing steed comes forth. Ha! Who cried villain base? The dreaded voice rings in his, the dreaded voice rings in his ear. Vile murderer, thy day is o'er. The tyrant shakes in rage and fear. Then he groans and falls to rise no more. Another one from Michael. Now, this is a Trevelyan road to nowhere. It's actually going in a circle. So they had men from all the workhouses with water and thin gruel as food, breaking rocks and building this road. It just comes up, just zigzags about there, up the hill, a bit of a deviation, and then goes down to the bottom of the hill and joins up to where it started. In the middle of nowhere, and that's the nonsensical part. To have them doing this, wasting money, what could have been spent on famine relief, it's just another bit of evidence for something contrived. Now we have another song coming up. This is the Loch Shieling eviction. It's a powerful song depicting the powerful song depicting the sorrowful tale of the Mount Nugent eviction of 1848 in County Cavan. That's the one of the southern counties of Ulster which were left in the Republic. A few evictions were carried out to test the mood of the people, and it was decreed anyone giving aid or shelter to them was to be themselves evicted. No aid was given. The people were starving and terrified. Shortly after, 700 people were evicted from the homes in one day. And that's another where it's not clear whether it was 700 evictions or 700 homes were evicted, because you can times that by 4,900 if there was 7 in each thing. So there's hidden figures all over the place. And that's a picture of Loch Shieling there in County Cavan. sorry. Farewell, my love, but that farewell, my tale of anguish, no tongue can tell, for I'm forced to cross the ocean wide, from the home I love, by Loch Shielin side. Farewell, my love, a sad farewell, my tale of anguish, no tongue can tell, for I'm forced across that ocean wide, from the home I love, by Loch Shielin side. It always gets me going, that one. The sheer scale of evictions, particularly in the south and west of Ireland, prompted newspapers to employ special correspondents who visited the scenes of the clearances. Among the reporters in the field was James McCarthy, proprietor of the Limerick Examiner, who led the way in this regard, undertaking a pilgrimage amid scenes of havoc and despair. James McCarthy had no shortage of material to report on, particularly in counties such as Clare and Tipperary, but it was a perilous task. On several occasions, McCarthy was insulted and assaulted in the discharge of his journalistic duty by some of the disgruntled hired thugs or wreckers who were employed in levelling the houses of the evicted tenants. It was these actions and more which ensured the wreckers will be long remembered in Irish communities. The people will be better prepared to protect themselves in the future than they have been in 1847. And that's the title of this song, it's Black 47. It was another song, I couldn't track the tune down. I found the words in an obscure manuscript when I collected from an American source. And as I read through it, it was matching a tune called Youghal Harbour. If you look on the map in County Cork, it looks like Youghal, but it's said like, you know, the Clampets, Youghal, come back now. So it's Youghal. And anyway, that became the song Boulevard, and then in the prison camps it became the song Moreton Bay, which was the penal colony, which became Brisbane. And in Black 47s, cold dark evenings, I heard a crying, all in the wind, till England done its mighty empire stand before the heavens for all their sin. A curse upon you, Lord Trevelyan, is no love at all left on the earth. Sin this God dying, all up in heaven may a blackened soul be raucous in Black 47s. Cold dark evenings, me old one rolled over on the cold, cold ground. The grass is stained green upon her pale For many Irish people, the famine and the brutal policies of the British government were the final ultimatum before deciding to leave Ireland. The majority had no choice, leave or starve. The many thousands were either evicted tenant farmers or people whose homes and villages were just in the way of the landowners' plans. Of the estimated 1.8 million who arrived in the United States between 1845 and 1855, most were much poorer and in worse health than those who had gone before them. It was a fact that almost one-third of the new arrivals were from the poorer Gaelic-speaking areas. The industrial areas of Britain were also large areas of Irish settlement, filling the labour shortages of Britain's mines, mills and foundries. Now, this is it's a song which I've adapted of Shane McGowan's. Another good singer we lost last year, although it was Manic and a substantive user who also done fan songs. But the spirits will be free. They'll break the chains of poverty, and they'll dance. They'll dance. They'll dance. Crossing the Bowl of Tears. That was what it was known as sailing the Atlantic to escape the famine and to New York. They were called coffin ships, the ones who made the journeys. They were old merchantmen and slave ships, and they were barely seaworthy. And they were like a conveyor belt, taking misery over to New York and Boston, places like that. So I can't see that an operation like that could have been done without collusion from the government. I think it was a plan to depopulate and maybe taking what was once a volatile population, get rid of a threat of insurrection. No, that says crossing the Bowl of Tears. You might not be able to read it, so I've got it charted out, so I'll read it out to you what it says. In a frantic attempt to outwit death, nearly 2 million people fled Ireland. Many thousands of peasants who could still scrape up the means fled by the sea, as if pursued by wild beasts, and betook themselves to America, wrote Irish patriot John Mitchell. The emigrants boarded the vessels so unseaworthy they were called coffin ships. So many passengers died at sea, the poet John Boyle O'Reilly called the Atlantic Ocean on which they journeyed the Bowl of Tears. And that's in Boston Harbour. That's the plaque. I'll just show you the series of statues to commemorate the arrival of the famine refugees. And that's in Boston. I couldn't find a full picture of it, but there's a few more statues, and some of them are they're very graphic, depicting like malnutrition. I'll have a look at the eviction and emigration methods now. The main one was for the landlord to pay to send pauper families overseas to Britain and North America. Landlords would first make false promises of money, food and clothing, then send the former tenants, half-naked and malnourished people, to the overcrowded British sailing ships, poorly built and often unseaworthy. These became known as coffin ships. This method must have had the backing of the British government. Assisted passage was allowed for those families who wished to work in the mills and mines to travel supported by the Commission of the Workhouse, with collusion from the industrialists. Also, the Catholic Church network often facilitated this migration in tandem with the British industrialists. I think that's why a lot of people found their way to Wigan and not on a coffin ship. Immigrants were crowded into subdivided homes that were intended for single families. Living in tiny cramped spaces, cellars, attics, make-do spaces in alleys became homes. A lack of adequate sewerage and running water in these places meant cleanliness was next to impossible. This one's an heartbreaker. The next song is named after the town of Skibbereen in County Cork, which was one of the worst affected southern areas during the famine. It was written that the lyrics of Skibbereen are a poignant reflection of the devastating impact of the famine to the Irish people, particularly the forced emigration of millions of people to escape starvation and disease. It was written by Richard Carpenter, a native of Skibbereen, who left Ireland in the famine year of 1847 and settled in New York. The song is a narration of a young man who had been forced to leave his homeland with his son, leaving his belongings behind to seek a better life in a foreign land. He speaks to his son, lamenting on the loss of his wife, his home, the beauty of the Irish countryside that he may never see again. The words of the song capture the despair and the longing of the narrator as he remembers the homeland he has left behind. Oh, Father dear, I oft times heard you talk of Erin's Isle. Her valleys green, her lofty scene, her mountains rude and wild. You said it was a pleasant place wherein a prince might dwell. Why have you then forsaken her? The reason to me tell. My son, I loved our native land with the energy and pride, until a blight fell o'er the crops and the sheep and cattle died. The rents and taxes were to pay, I could not them redeem, and that's the cruel reason why I left old Skibbereen. It's well I do remember on a bleak December's day, the landlord and his bailiffs came to drive us all away. He set me house on fire with his demon yellow spleen, and that's another reason why I left old Skibbereen. Your mother too, God rest her soul, lay on the snowy ground,
She fainted in her anguish of the desolation round. She never rose but went away from life to death's long dream. And I found a quiet grave for her in lovely Skibbereen. It's well I do remember in the year of 48, when we arose with errand boys to fight against cruel fate. I was hunted through the mountains as the traitor to the Queen, and that's another reason why I left home Skibbereen. Oh, you was only 2 years old, and feeble was your frame. I could not leave you with me friends, for you bore your father's name. I left you in my Cottamore at the dead of night unseen, and I heaved a sigh and I said goodbye to dear old Skibbereen. I saw fathers and boys and girls without any cheeks, without rosy cheeks and silken curls, all the missing and starving for the want of a mouthful of food to eat. When they died in Skibbereen, no shrouds and coffins were to be seen, but patiently reconciling themselves to the desperate, horrid fate, they were thrown in graves all wholesale, which caused many an Irish heart to wail, and caused many an Irish boy and girl to be most glad to emigrate and leave behind old Skibbereen. And I heaved a sigh and said goodbye to dear old Skibbereen.
Right, this is going to be end of part one. So I put a question. Was the Irish diaspora the scattering, an emigration, or a deportation of an unwanted population? And was the famine a natural disaster that was deliberately exacerbated to allow that deportation? Well, I think it was. What do you lot think? Raise your hands if you think it was contrived. Immigration to England, an arrival in Wigan, and its pits, mills, yards and back-to-backs. This is what we're looking at now. That's Liverpool Dockland. It was overwhelmed in the... Thousands of Irish migrants had arrived in Liverpool with the aim of continuing the journey to North America or Australia. Many only had the resources for the first part of the journey. They needed work. Britain's industrial towns were the only option. Many were directed to Wigan, where migration had been steady since the beginning of the famine. In Liverpool, there was much animosity to the new arrivals. So we've got a little ditty of a song here which I managed to find. It's called No Irish Wanted Here.
I'm an Irishman, both brave and true. I'm hearty and I'm strong. An idleness I've never loved, to me race it don't belong. I've still the strength to work and toil for the wants of life a dear. And I'm told whenever I ask for work, no Irish wanted here. Now you may think it's a misfortune to be christened Pat or Dan, but to me it is a blessing to be called an Irishman. Hurrah me boys for Paddy's land, it's a land I do adore. May heaven smile on every child who loves the Shamrock shore. And when we came to Liverpool town, was work or else we die. All over town we met these words, no Irish need apply. You may think it's a misfortune to be christened Patadan, but to me it is a blessing to be called an Irishman. I'm an Irishman, both brave and true. I'm hearty and I'm strong. An idleness I've never loved, to my race it don't belong. I've still the strength to work and toil for the wants of life a dear. But I'm told whenever I ask for work, no Irish wanted here. Oh.
Like, as in many industrial towns, the Irish emigrants began settling in Wigan in the mid-1840s to the early 1850s. They were fleeing the devastating potato famines which wreaked havoc in most parts of Ireland, where people's livelihoods were still dependent on the soil. Added to this, the mass of brutal, heartless evictions of tenants which turned them into emigrants. I feel the word deportees would be more apt. It was suggested in some quarters that removing the children and women from the English pits and the children from the English mills in the 1842 Reform Act, followed by the reduction of hours in the 1844 Factories Act, caused a significant labour shortage in industrial areas and significantly a dip in the already massive profit margins. It was also suggested that the laissez-faire, or let things take their course, attitude of the British upper classes to the Irish famine and the sheer number of evictions of Irish tenant farmers was indeed evidence that the industrialists and absentee landlords were using the famine to supply cheap labour to Britain's industrial heartland, thus driving wages down. One trick used by the infamous Lord Londonderry in the northeast of England was to cut miners' pay by 10%, force a strike, then replace the strikers with emigrants and force the strikers back on less pay. There's no conclusive evidence to these theories, but much circumstantial evidence. But I'm sure any self-respecting gambler would call it a dead cert. It's also interesting at the height of the famine in 1847, Ireland's food exports had increased dramatically from the 1844 level. The repeal of the Corn Laws also meant larger profits for the Irish landowners. Housing in industrial Wigan. If they thought Whistlermain's flats were bad, well, listen to this. It's believed to be up to a possible 5,000 Irish immigrants came to Wigan between 1844 and 1851. The majority of men working down the mines, the women in the spinning mills. For most immigrants who populated the filthy, overcrowded yards and courts of Scholes and Walgate and the squalid yards of the town centre, such as Little London, it was the only accommodation they could find. In many cases, the yards were owned by the mill, the colliery owners. They were mostly one-up, one-down hovels. Some yards had no water supply or sanitation. An 1849 report described 45 small two-room cottages in Barracks Yard off Walgate, where there were 257 inhabitants, which was an average of 6 people to each dwelling. That's one room above, one room below. It's probably a curtain separating the boys and girls and whatever. No water supply or drainage, with just 4 privies in total. Life was indeed hard for the new arrivals and the people who'd been there from the 1820s when the mills were mechanised. This is the 1849 report in the one-up, one-down housing in the industrial area of Lower Walgate, which the immigrants would have endured along with their fellow Wigan workers. It was a Queen Street ward then. In the Queen Street ward, which covered the industrial Walgate quarter and the potteries, there were rows of one-up, one-down houses. This means 1 room upstairs and 1 room downstairs. Under the stairs, there is an alcove measuring about 5 feet by 5 feet, and it serves as the larder, scullery and coal hole. The kitchen measures about 12 feet by 10 feet, and the room upstairs corresponds to it. An open fireplace with an oven at the side. All houses in Wigan have this. A tiny yard outside and a multiple-use privy for the row. In many cases, these hovels were back-to-back. The same plan as above, but instead of the alcove, there was a recess about 2 feet deep containing the sink. No room for a larder or a yard. That's a picture of Little London. It probably dates to about 1870, 1880, that one, but an absolute slum, typical of the yards and courts that housed the first immigrants and hundreds of Wigan workers. There's a little London. You know the Griffin, what Billy Boston used to have? There was a pathway next to it what went to Acton's Yard, and that was Little London, and it comes out in yeah. I thought it was the one outside of the Griffin. Yeah, it's opposite St Mary's, but yeah, it comes out in Upper Dickinson Street, round about Acton Acton Terrace, yeah. But it's changed so much, Wigan, and there was all sorts. In schools, my great-granddad lived in great-great-granddad lived in Mitchison's yard. That's probably underneath Sunshine House now, off Wellington Street. And Neil, your lot kit was in Fleece Yard, weren't they? And then Fogg's Place and Fleece Yard. They were terrible. Honestly, worst houses going. And I don't think you could call them houses. Pigs would go on strike if they had going, don't they? But that's all they had, and that's what they had to put up with. Ethnic and religious divisions were also an important feature of local politics and society, particularly in relation to Irish immigrants. Liverpool and Manchester attracted the largest concentration of Irish people in Lancashire, though from the 1840s there were rapidly growing Irish populations in Wigan, St Helens and Lee, primarily for mines and mills. By the turn of the 20th century, the Irish presence in Wigan, St Helens and Lee accounted for almost one-third of the local populations. However, there may be a tendency to confuse Irish-born with Irish ethnicity. For the 1891 census recorded almost 4,000 people of Irish birth living in the Wigan borough. But they were probably first generation. They might have even been second generation because there were so many full streets. I was looking at a census for Rupert Street where my granddad lived, and there was Scallies, Dummikins, Mannions, Malloys. All the street was Irish. The large concentration of Irish people, mainly from the west of Ireland, were now settled and working, mainly in the mills and mines. It wasn't long before the Irish in Wigan were falsely accused of undercutting the wages of the local English. That was done by the policies of Wigan Coal and Iron and other employees trying to divide workers' pay. Workers pay lower wages and enhance their already large profits. On top of the terrible housing conditions, the emigrants to Wigan suffered dirty and dangerous working conditions. There were frequent disease epidemics such as cholera, flu, typhus. Typhus probably spread mostly by top and tailing in bed. And sometimes when there was shift work, the day shift would get out and the night shift would get in. So they were all crammed in two downs and one up, one downs. There was only healthcare for those with the ability to pay. Low wages, poor sanitation, little or no education opportunities, and discrimination from some quarters. The comfort was the St Patrick's Church. And there's St Pat's standing today. That's the second build. The first build was I'll tell you about it now, 1847. The Church of St Patrick is one of the best known Catholic churches in Wigan. It was opened in 1847 to serve the town's newly arrived Irish community. In 1848, a published directory of Catholic churches in England and Wales described St Patrick's as built for the incoming Irish community with elaborate furnishings. The mission was established from St Mary's, Wigan in 1847, administering to the newly arrived Irish community in the densely populated Scholes area. The site for the church was acquired from the estate of the Andertons, a local Catholic family. The first church was designed by local architect James Fairclough and opened by Bishop Brown, Vicar Apostolic of the Lancashire district, on November the 30th, 1847. Father James Nugent was appointed the first parish priest of St Patrick's. He later achieved fame for his pioneering social work in Liverpool. St Joseph's RC, Catholic Church. Oh, I went down Caroline Street today, and it's heartbreaking, and it was a lovely church, and they broke in it, they destroyed the inside and everything. Another Catholic church and school was St Joseph's in Caroline Street, built in 1878 to accommodate Walgate's expanding Irish community. The emigrants worked hard in harsh conditions side by side with the Wigan workers. They made homes, raised family, and assimilated into the communities. There were tensions and problems, as there is in all areas of immigration, but in the main, integration was quite successful. maybe because most of the indigenous Wiganers lived in the same type of housing, worked at the same jobs, and suffered the same deprivation and poor working conditions. Wigan was big on the Irish National League. On the night of the 25th of March 1881, at a meeting of a section of Irish members at the Westminster Palace Hotel, the Irish National Land League of Great Britain was constituted, and the objectives were being defined, not very clearly, but generally, as it would seem, contemplating the introduction of Irish National Land League principles in England and the founding of branches in many parts of the sister country. It wasn't long before the Wigan area branches were opened. Now, the Land League, the formation of the Land League is considered one of the most important moments in Irish history. It was very popular because so many people were affected by eviction and high rents, and poverty was widespread. The aims of the Land League included the following: fair rent, an end to rack renting, which was the charging of extremely high rents to allow tenant farmers to remain working in the lands; fixing of tenure, the ability of tenant farmers to stay on the lands without threat of eviction; free sale, the granting of the right to farmers to work towards full ownership of lands they tilled. That's a picture from the 1870s of a poor Irish family. You've got 3 militia soldiers and a group of bailiffs throwing out a family. So things were still going, and that was why the Land League was formed. The Irish National Land League branches in Britain were formed in support of Irish immigrants to raise awareness of the inequalities on the island of Ireland. On the 25th of April 1883, this letter to the editor of the Wigan Observer appeared. So I would thank you to allow me to inform the public through your paper of 1 or 2 facts that have occurred. As you are aware from a letter in last week's issue, there have been meetings of the Wigan branch of the Irish National League held at the Queen's Arms, Queen Street. But judge to our surprise when we were informed by the tenant of the Queen's Arms that his landlord had forbidden him to have any more of these meetings. A new meeting room was sought. After a nomadic start, the Irish National League meeting rooms were eventually found in Rowbottom Square in 1884. Although the plans included proposals for a club, there is little evidence of when that came to fruition. At the inaugural meeting of the League in Rowbottom Square, the following officers were elected for the Wigan branch of the Irish National League. President, Mr. James McNulty. Now, we'll deal with James a little bit later, but he's the guy from the shoe shop in Larby Street. The Vice President, Mr. James Power, Treasurer, J. Henry, Secretaries, T. E. Webb and M. Morris. The Committee, Messrs. M. Rowland, T. Mason, J. Jackson, T. O'Loughlin, W. J. McCanny, Michael Seagrave Jr., the poet's son. He became Councillor for Schools as well. P. Phillips, M. Ryan, J. Crimmins, W. Morris, T. Welch, M. Early, J. Meehan, M. Horan, M. Flannery, and J. Foley. And there's still a lot with that name. Coming here. The Irish National League and the Brian Brew Club. I have put that on because I did this talk at the Brian Brew on Thursday. The Brian Brew Club at Ashton in Makerfield is the oldest Irish club in the UK. It was established in 1889. The Ashton branch of the Irish National League became the Brian Brew branch in 1886. The club was built 3 years later, and they have continually strived to support and encourage the preservation of the Irish culture, the music, the dance, the heritage and the history, and will continue to do so. The club aims to cater for all age groups. In November 1903, a meeting of the committees of the various Wigan branches was held at the National Irish Club listed in King Street, but up to now I've not found out which building it was in. For the purpose of forming a general committee to organise a great Irish demonstration to be held in Wigan that month, when Mr. W. Redmond MP, who started the Land League in Ireland, would visit the town. Councillor McCaid, In the chair, others present were Councillors Michael Seagrave and Mr Clark. It's possible the Wigan branch of the Irish National League may have merged with the Brown Brew after the closing of the Wigan National Irish Club. Up to now, I've not found the building number for the King Street National Irish Club. Now, this is dear to all the hearts of the Wigan Irish. There was 21 from St Patrick's died in that explosion. 2 survivors were Wigan Irish people, and 75 men were killed when there was the gas explosion. That's at Abram, the Maypole, and it was 1908. If anybody, I'm not going to do the names, but 75 men were lost. There were many Wigan Irish victims. But I'll not go through all the names because we're getting on a bit. And that was the poster for the benefit. They'd managed to get together photos of over 20 of the guys who were killed. In 1908, not everybody had photographs. The 3 survivors were Edward Farrell, W.M. Doran and Richard Furhurst. 21 of the dead came from St Patrick's Roman Catholic Parish in Wigan. The entire parish shared the grief of the bereaved. On the Sunday following the disaster, Canon Sommer sang a solemn requiem mass for the dead, which was attended by the people from all the Catholic churches in Wigan. A choir picked from all the churches sang at the mass, and Dr. O'Donoghue of St Mary's preached a sermon. As you walk into St Patrick's Church today, you'll see a memorial to the dead of the disaster. Descendants of the victims still live in the parish. And I wrote this poem when I found out about the Maypole. At Abram, in the Wigan coalfield in the year 1908, 18th of August, on a Tuesday eve, a rumble shook the street to tell the colliers' families of disaster down the mine. They ran down to the pit from home and earth, the menfolk for to find. The column of pit dust and soot rose out of number 1. To the fan house and the lamp house, much damage had been done. 75 poor pitmen still down that 4-foot face. Rescue teams from Wigan Junction tried to tunnel to that place. 3,000 feet below the ground, the explosion had occurred. Foul air, fire, gas and dust all in that hellish world. Rescue men from Garswood Hall went down shaft number 2 to try and reach survivors in that man-made hell below. Soon, just after midnight, the first miner's body was found. Hours later, they found more bodies, all spread out on the ground. Some had covered their heads and eyes against the fireball heat. Some knelt in prayer as they knew their fate, and the seconds left to live. On Wednesday the 19th, they knew the death toll's full extent. All 75 men in the shaft, they now were listed dead. The bodies could not all be found as new fires sprang to life, with rescuers themselves rescued from that place of death and strife. The smoking, burning shaft of hell at that pit Maypole was impassable to the rescue teams as fires raged below. Gallons of water were pumped in to flood that blazing hole, to quench the flames and seal the tombs of the men who died for coal. People of Irish descent in service of Britain at time of war. There's so many what you could include, but the one which sticks out was my great uncle's regiment, the Irish Guards 2nd Battalion, and mainly because they were all exempt miners who died, and they had one of the first VCs won by a Wigan soldier. It's Father Thomas Woodcock who was the on the cenotaph for the Irish Guards First World War. William Ford, John Holliday, Patrick Kenny, James Murphy, Thomas Parkinson, James Scally, James Speakman and Thomas Woodcock. The Wigan Irish volunteered for the armed forces in time of war, even though many were exempt because of the dangers and necessities of mining. For Britain's industry, notable were the St. Pat's Irish Guardsmen. This shows patriotism to Britain and an affinity to Ireland. A St. Patrick's miner in school they call it Belvoir Street, but it's actually Beaver Street. Thomas Woodcock was one of the first Wigan soldiers to win the VC. Thomas and his friends joined the Irish Guards at a series of recruitment days at St. Patrick's. Now, there was a lot of trouble with the Sinn Féiners and IRA at the time. It was revving up to the Easter Rising, and it was unsafe for recruiting sergeants to go out doing what they normally do, going from town to town recruiting. So they recruited in the Irish communities of England for the Irish Guards 2nd Battalion. They fought in bitter campaigns in Flanders and Belgium over 4 years. Thomas won the VC in September 1917 and was killed in action March 1918. The rest died during the course of the war. Sergeant John Derbyshire was wounded with mustard gas and shrapnel in late 1916. He was shipped home and died of his wounds in 1919. His name wasn't added to the cenotaph. My great-uncle Guardsman James Scully was wounded in 1916 and later killed in action November 1917. He had this picture done with his two brothers. So we've got, on your left is my great-uncle Tommy Scully, and that's James Scully in the middle. They've all put the best bib and tucker, and that's the only photograph we had of him. And on your right, that's Michael Scully, and he was the oldest, James. So he said, "You two stop down the pit, do your bit down the pit, and look after the family, and I'll do the fighting." And he nearly made it, but was killed in 1917. After the Great War, the Wigan Irish had become skilled miners, builders, engineers, shopkeepers, entrepreneurs, contributing to Wigan's economy. In those early days, many of the girls and women worked in the spinning mills. The female-led Wigan District Weavers, Winders, Reelers and Beamers Association. Well, they're all in that book. Plus the Women's Social and Political Union. That was an all-female and run by female cotton mill union. They brought improvements to their conditions with the backing of the Women's Social and Political Union. They stood shoulder to shoulder with their neighbours in the general strike of 1926. The introduction of one person, one vote in 1928, irrespective of property ownership, opened up political avenues for all. The post-World War I recessions carried on into the 1930s. Deprivation came once again to the town. In 1936, author George Orwell came to the town to research his book, The Road to Wigan Pier. Wigan was a complete microcosm of the industrial north. His book was either loved or hated in the town. After the recessions of the 1930s and the austerity of the Second World War years, things improved for all Wigan people, with housing, health and education a priority. The 1945 Labour government brought radical changes, and a few of them down there in Westminster should look at the history. Descendants of the Irish emigres prominent in Wigan, these men went on to serve the community as mayor. Joseph T.G. in 1898, Dr. James O'Donoghue 1906, Patrick Murphy 1928, Daniel O'Rourke 1934, Edward Maloney 1947 and 48, John Riley 1949, Francis Connolly 1961 and Bernard Coyle in the 70s and 80s. Bernard had a son, Bernard, bloody good school afterwards too, back in the 70s. Michael Seagrave, the Seagrave family, Michael Seagrave came over from Drogheda in around 1838. He was a highly skilled handloom weaver and lived in Greenwich Street. He became involved with Fergus O'Connor's Charters and was a prominent National Council member. He moved to Barnsley for a number of years before returning to Wigan in Wellington Street, Scholes, where he ran a bookshop with his wife Mary. After his death in 1875, his son, also Michael, became a founder member of the National Irish League in Wigan, a councillor for Scholes. He later sold the bookshop and moved to my favourite place, Belvoir Street, or Beaver Street, Scholes. It was Michael Seagrave Sr. who wrote two of the poems in our presentation. And it's another success story for an Irish family. McNulty's Shoes, Library Street, Wigan, founded 1858. A glimpse of a Wigan Irish business that has endured through the ages. James McNulty was an impoverished Irish shoemaker who came over from Scholes from County Mayo in the 1840s with his tool bag and a pocket full of dreams. He had a trade and the will to succeed. He designed a workbook for miners. James made samples and took them to Wigan Coal and Iron. James won a contract to manufacture the workbooks for Wigan Coal and Iron in 1858. He worked from his little shop in Scholes. When Library Street was opened, James bought new premises on the corner of Arcade Street. The business is still going strong after 4 generations. Incidentally, James McNulty and Michael Seagrave Jr. and Sr. are buried next to each other in the Roman Catholic section of Cemetery. Michael Jr. and James were both committee members of the Irish National League. James McNulty was also president. And there's James McNulty and there's Councillor Michael Seagrave. There's no photograph in existence of his father, Michael Seagrave, the poet. Another song that I wrote. A friend of mine, George Barlow, he was a fiddle player and a poet. And I used to back him on bouzouki or else guitar with in the sessions and that. And he wrote this song after watching Angela's Ashes. And he gave me the chorus and wrote chord sequence to it. And I played with him at a few festivals. He always wanted to get up and sing that one, so I used back him. Anyway, he had a long illness and then died. And everybody wanted to play that song at his funeral, and there was only the chorus left. And I remembered the tune. And anyway, I took the liberty of rewriting it about the famine and the settlement of the Wigan people, the Irish people in Wigan. And it ended up like this. And I think George will be well pleased with it. Oh, Mother of Ireland, you're calling to me, you're singing through flowers, the woods and the fields. You tell me of cruelty on days long ago, when the famine forced people from Erin's green shore. In the 1840s, there came the great blight as the poor tenant farmers struggled to stay alive, them having no money to pay the landlords. The cabins were pulled down, they were forced on the road to the workhouse and town. The poor souls made the way just for food and some shelter from the wind.
were bound for old Liverpool on England's fair shore. Some of the people couldn't take any more, and their lives ebbed away in eternity's sleep. Their bodies were cast into the sea briny deep. When they docked, they were gathered and formed into lines, some heading for Wigan, the hill mills and the mines, giving water and gruel for their hunger to stay. At least they have work and their lives had been saved. Oh, mother of Ireland, you're calling to me. You're singing through flowers, the woods and the trees. You tell me of cruelty of days long ago, when the famine forced people from Erin's green shore. In the old village of Scopes, they soon made their own, built the church of St. Patrick to remember their home. In the mines and the mills they survived, made new lives, but they never forget the homes they left behind. Oh, mother of Ireland, you're calling to me. You're singing through flowers, the woods and the trees. You tell me of cruelty of days long ago, when the famine forced people from Erin's green shore.
Sport and achievements. In sports, young Wigan men of Irish descent became champion Greco-Roman wrestlers under the watchful eye of Billy Riley at Riley's gym. Firstly, Wigan St Patrick's, then St Jude's, St James's and St Cuthbert's amateur rugby league clubs provided a conveyor belt of young talent for the professional rugby league game. I don't need to introduce the two fellas there, do I? The circle turned fully when ex-Wigan Rugby League captain Andy Farrell, OBE, became head coach of the Ireland Rugby Union team and moved to Dublin. Most of Andy's extended family traced back to the famine. A good few graced the game of rugby league as professionals. His uncle, John Farrell, who, if anybody knows John, is not doing so good, is in the care home at the sheltered accommodation at Bedford in Leigh at the moment. But puts his tie and go to a funeral every day. He's suffering a bit. And he had a brain hemorrhage playing for Oldham in the old First Division. And the insurance company said it was an illness and not an injury, and it hadn't been caused by a tackle, so he didn't get anything, and he finished his game with nothing. His cousins, Wigan and Rugby League captain Liam Farrell, and Liam's brother, Conor Farrell, also played with Wigan. Many played North West Counties Amateur Rugby League. Some played for Beach Hill with us, Brian Farrell and Francis Farrell. Francis played with Springfield, and Kevin, Liam's dad, he played for Springfield as well. And Andy's in-laws, the Lochlins, are also a rugby league institution. They've got a Wallgate heritage as well as schools. Kieran and Kevin having great professional careers, both starting at Wigan, and Kieran's son, Sean O'Loughlin, OBE, captain in Wigan and England Rugby League. Kevin's son, Jason, played for Salford. Andy's son, Owen, started his rugby at St Patrick's, then moved south with his family, progressing through the Saracens ranks to captain England Rugby Union and the British Lions. Not bad record who for families who, most of them originated from St. Pat's Parish, but some were Walgaters as well. Now, Jean Monaghan from Massachusetts. Now, Claire got an email off Jean, and she told us about a great granddad who was a poet and an activist, a chartist, and could they help fill a few gaps. Anyway, we got to work on it. We managed to find lots of stuff to and. Jan also helped a lot with the census, and when she was on holiday in England, she came over and met us in Wigan. It was a fantastic day. They took her to the museum, where the museum staff had found one of the pamphlets and copied it for her, and we even took her apart at Silverwell. His local had been knocked down, but we took her for a jar at Silverwell as well. Took her to St. Pat's Church, took her to the graveyard, and found the grave, and incidentally, it's buried the next door neighbours in James McNulty and Michael Seagrave. You know, it was incredible, because I was doing an history of the shoe shop and how they came over with nothing and sort of made it. But, if you can make it out, Wigan District Weavers, Binders, Beavers and Beavers Association. That's the official plaque there, and it's up in the Wigan Museum. And so she was absolutely made up, Jean. And we're still in contact, aren't we? And so hopefully she'll come over again when we've got a meeting on. So, this photo is the Athenry Heritage Centre, County Galway. So, you know what's coming now, don't you? Pete St. John's classic famine song, The Fields of Athenry. Now, this chorus is compulsory, so I've done that for you. By a lonely prison wall, I heard a young girl calling. Michael, they are sending you away. Against the famine and the crown, I rebelled, they rode me down. You must raise our child in liberty. Oh, lie the fields
the fields of Athenry, where once we watched the small free birds fly. Our love was on the wing, we had dreams and songs to sing. It's so lonely round the fields of Athenry. Lonely round the fields of Athenry. Thank you.